Welcome to Going Dark, a podcast exploring Netflix's sci-fi series, Dark. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga, and today we're discussing Season 1, Episode 3, entitled Past and Present.
Yes, and as you may notice, we are a week late on this particular episode because Olga over here got sick.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a COVID scare.
Yes, but everything turned out okay in the end. But we are back here on Tuesdays, both on YouTube and audio podcast services. Every Tuesday that something like this doesn't happen.
Within our plans.
Yes.
Yeah.
So check us out either on youtube.com/doingOK or podcast services. What did you think of this episode?
I really enjoyed this episode. I don't know. It was exactly what we kind of hoped. It's building on the mythology. It's expanding on these characters. We were wondering when their past selves, like the very first scene being photographs of people when they were younger versus older, when that would happen. And we're already in episode 3 and it's taking place. So I feel like this is a great time to really like set things in motion and have some excitement. And I think the casting is phenomenal.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure we're not the first people to say that.
I know, but it's so impressive, and that made it really believable and very immersive, and I love that.
Yeah, definitely didn't take me out, except for to be like, oh my god, and now I'm in it again. I think this was, definitely a step up. It was almost like a second pilot in a weird way. Yeah. It's like introducing you to all these characters that you only sort of know, and even some that you've never even really heard of.
Right.
So very interesting to see that. And I also just want to say, as a American and someone who's mostly consumed American media, very interesting to see a time travel story in a different country, which I realize is something I've almost never experienced. The idea of start off right away with like this old commercial that doesn't mean anything to me, but like I have an analog for, as far as whether it's like an old Kit Kat commercial or whatever. And even like some of the 80s music that I do recognize, but some 80s stuff that I don't recognize and things like that, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. I can sort of relate to that in that I consume or grew up consuming a good amount of Soviet era like entertainment. So that when my family started consuming like post-Cold War Russian entertainment, it was like a very weird like time travel like experience for me, being like, oh, this is caught up to the modern era, and now I feel like a fish out of water with this like previously contextualized thing, even though it's not American. So this show kind of lives in that weird like land for me as well. But obviously with German instead of Russian.
All that being said, shall we get into the quick recap?
Let's do it.
All right, so past and present. We are going to do this based on character arc, I guess, because there's a lot of things going on. So we're starting with Mikkel, and he is in 86 now. He goes into what is his house, but his family's not there. He sees that old commercial playing on the TV. He runs into his grandma, who is very distraught over Mads being missing. And she like freaks out at him a little bit, and he runs away.
He doesn't realize she's his grandmother, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a little, in some ways, unclear whether he like is able to put that together at what point, and not. I mean, everything's internal.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So then his next, journey spot is he goes to the high school. He goes looking for his mom, who's the principal there. And then instead, he runs into his mom, who's the punk there. And she is hanging out with Hannah and some other chick. I don't think someone of note.
At least not yet.
Not obvious to me. And they're talking about music and prostitutes and murder and all those cool things.
And what teenagers talk about.
And Catalina is very hip and cool. And Hannah is a square. Oh my god. Mikkel goes up to them and is like, where's my mama? And they're like, you're crazy, dude. And he's like, I don't know. And then he goes to the police station where his papa works. but there's a different sheriff who's Regina's grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
The sheriff is like, what happened to you? Because he's all like busted up and stuff. And he's like, who's your father? And he says, it's Ulrich. And the sheriff doesn't like Ulrich and thinks it's a prank or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, he leaves the kid there to get picked up and brought to a nursing place.
To a hospital.
Yeah. Nursing place.
A nurse comes for him
Yes.
and takes him to the hospital.
But before the nurse gets there, he finds the notes about Mads and more things about the date and all that stuff. And I think this is when he like fully comes to terms with, fuck, I'm in the past.
I think so too.
Yeah. Then he gets picked up by Ines, who is Jonas's grandmother. He had this exchange with the other nurses about how she doesn't have kids. She's the only one without kids, blah, blah, blah.
She doesn't have a family, so...
And Olga smartly immediately knew who she was by her mole.
Yes. It's quite distinctive.
Yeah. And so Ines takes care of him. He doesn't really talk. Everybody's like, where are your parents? And he's like, Mom, and he looks at a comic book they gave him about time travel. But
if anything, I don't think he looks at it. I think she thought that he looked at it, and that's why he said, oh, I'm from the future. Like, she just saw him as a traumatized boy, and that he was like, oh, she's nice. I'll tell her the truth. And
I didn't read it that way. I think he looked down at it and just like said it out loud based on, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. We'll see, I guess.
I mean, I don't think we will. We'll see.
Yeah.
But
we'll figure out if he was actually...
Yeah. The point is, he runs away. He goes to the caves with a little lighter that he stole from the sheriff. Bad boy.
Chief of police, Dan. Again.
The sheriff. Those German sheriffs. And he goes down to the caves. He falls down. He's hurt. He's calling for help. And in the present, Ulrich is looking for him in the caves with a crowbar and trying to get into that door, and it's not working. And they like hear reverberations of each other, and they sort of parallel each other's journey. And it's like, whoa, like this is like the place between places. And that's the end of that.
Yeah.
So
they don't find each other, and it's sad.
Yeah. Now, jumping back, I think I'll follow Claudia, who is Regina's mother. Regina, is that how we're saying it?
Probably.
All right. Obviously, if we're saying names wrong, help us.
Yeah.
But Claudia is this hoity-toity, big-time...
I don't know if hoity-toity.
Big-time plant owner, runner, director.
Plant director.
She directs all the plants, and she is driving Regina to school before she starts her first day as the first female power plant director. And it's a big deal. Everybody's like, whoa, women. And
a lady wearing pants. I can't believe it.
Even for the 80s, that's progressive. She's driving Regina. She's like practicing for her like speech or something, just prepping for the day. And she's like, oh, Regina, why don't you, try anything? You're a mess of a woman. And it reflects badly on me. So I will now take a side swerve and talk about the rest of Regina because there's not that much.
Yeah.
She goes home, reveals that she has scars from self-harm. And then later on, they show her like putting on lipstick and fixing her hair up and like looking at her body and stuff. The only thing I want to say there, so they show the like parallel between her and the older version of her.
Her in the 80s as a teen versus her as an adult in 2019.
She's giving herself a breast exam.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Which might be nothing. Might just be like, oh, look, they're naked for different reasons or whatever.
Right.
But also might have to do with maybe Claudia dies from cancer.
That's where I think it's going. I mean, we saw that the nuclear power plant was being mismanaged. The barrels of nuclear waste could have given her cancer, specifically breast cancer, that killed her. I think it's telling that we don't see a parallel of her as an elderly woman when we see other elderly people. Yeah. So
it's interesting, though, that there are a couple weird exceptions that they don't like actually show the parallels.
That's
like
true.
Katarina, we didn't ever actually see back and forth.
Even, I don't think we saw Helga either.
No, I don't think we did.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So back to Claudia. She goes to work at the plant. She runs into Helge, who is like a janitor there, seemingly.
Yeah.
He's mopping up a sign, like a graffiti that says "No future." We'll get back to that. And he is like seemingly smitten with Claudia, maybe. And he's like, "Oh, it's so great that you're a woman and you're doing this job. And here's a present." And he gives her a book, which we'll get back to. So then Claudia is like doing her job. She's checking in on certain numbers and figures and things, and she realizes there's irregularities. But before she deals with that, she has to deal with a man.
Ugh, men.
And she has to deal with this journalist who is
Tronte Nielsen, also known as Ulrich's dad. The grandfather of all the kids, including Mikkel.
So Tonto,
no.
he and Claudia are having an illicit affair, or at least have in the past, but it seems like maybe she's backing off of it. So in both time periods, there's affairs. Ooh.
Yeah, the Nielsen men are not the most
not
faithful.
to be trusted.
Yeah.
So she's like, "I don't know, man," and he's like, "My wife is going crazy. I need you." And what makes me almost wonder, like, do you think she was like maybe a little bit like disturbed or something before Mads even?
Yeah, she might have been unwell, but I feel like maybe an undedicated husband and a missing child put that over the top.
Yeah.
Men.
So do you think that where he goes in the present has anything to do with Claudia? I mean, I think Claudia's dead, but maybe he like visits her grave or something.
Maybe, yeah.
Then we jump back to her meeting with the former plant director as they transition. Imagine that, a nice transition of power from one person to another.
Dan, we get shat on for being too political on here. We're talking about a Cold War Germantown. Let's not touch it.
And even they have a nice transition of power to a progressive new age. She's like, "What's up with these irregularities? Like, you need to tell me stuff." And he's like, "Well, look, there are irregularities, but we like employ the entire friggin' town. You're taking on responsibility for like everybody that lives here, basically. So is there some shady stuff happening? Maybe, but like, if the plant gets shut down, it's not good."
Yeah. People are too worried about Chernobyl. Let's not worry about that. Let's not worry them about that.
So then he brings her down to this place in the caves that has tons of barrels of waste, seemingly nuclear radiation stuff.
Yeah.
Which are probably the same kinds of barrels that were taken away in the present when they had to like haul off stuff.
Yeah, in the middle of the night, considering that plant is shutting down.
Yeah.
Something you forgot to mention, maybe you would have gotten to, is that the retiring plant director seems to be Helge's dad.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because we saw him packing up family photos, and that looked like Helge. His ear was scarred.
His ear issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Helge, again, Claudia is sad. She goes back to her car. She's like contemplating stuff, and she opens up the gift that he gave her, which is a book, which is A Journey Through Time, which is the same book that the stranger had last week. Last episode.
Yes.
And then the episode also ends with the guy who wrote that book like tinkering with time
with
stuff.
The same machine that the stranger had in the hotel room.
Was it the same machine?
It
or
looked
a similar
very
machine?
Similar.
Okay.
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
I looked at a few things back and forth, but I couldn't figure out if there was anything distinctive enough to make sure that it was the same machine as opposed to a replica.
Yeah. So that's basically it for Claudia. She also doesn't end up meeting up with Tronte, whatever his name
Tronte,
is.
I think. We're trying here, guys.
Yeah, and
we're trying.
He's sad. Meanwhile, we have a few little side stragglers around. We have Charlotta, who is biking around. She finds a dead bird. She loves her dead birds. She draws a picture of her dead bird. Then she freezes it in the freezer because she's a psychopath.
Or she's noticing that something's off and she's going to be a cop and look at her powers of observation.
Psycho.
Maybe
Wow,
a
okay,
little.
if you had just taken drawn the picture, one thing. The fact that she freezes the bird, I thought was weird. But anyway.
She's freezing a lot of things. There was a frozen pizza in there, too.
And then also side thing, we have Ulrich and Hannah having a little chemistry sesh at the bus station as they talk about the end of the world and the destruction of Winden.
Vinden.
Vinden.
Third time's the charm.
They talk about it, and they're kind of cute. And yeah.
But she's too square for him. He needs a bad girl like Franziska.
Well, she becomes a bad girl. What?
Oh,
also not
does.
Franziska. Katarina.
Oh, Katarina. Oh, sorry. I was still thinking about Charlotta and how she was a dweeb, and now her daughter's a dweeb. So sorry, that was continued thought.
And then, so I guess the other big story is the sheriff, who is the police captain. And
chief of police, I think they call him. Whatever.
Mr. Policeman, sir. He gets a call. 33 sheep are dead. What the heck? Who killed all the sheep? This is fucking weird, man. Then he runs into Mikkel, which I talked about already. And he goes where?
To Ulrich's house, the Nielsen's house.
Because after he finds out that Mikkel was playing this prank, quote unquote.
Yeah, saying that his dad is Ulrich Nielsen.
He goes to have a talking to with Mr. Ulrich. And Ulrich is a bad customer, listening to that rowdy music and having those, intense things on the wall, and he's playing video games and
having a cloven foot on a shelf.
Yes, he is a tough customer. So the sheriff is like, "Did you kill the sheep? Blah, blah, blah." And Ulrich is like, "You're a drunk. Get out of here." And then the mom comes in. She's like, "Did you find Mads?" And he's like, "No." And he leaves.
Yeah.
So then he goes and talks to the sheep whisperer, his important sheep expert.
His medical examiner.
Guy. And he's like, "Yeah, no, they weren't poisoned, blah, blah, blah."
They had cardiac arrest.
They all had a panic and flipped out. None of them are missing a hoof, so it probably wasn't Ulrich.
It wasn't the Satanists.
Yeah, they have a nice talk about
Satanic Panic is one of my favorite stupid, awful things from the 80s. So
quality stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, their eardrums are all a mush, much like the child from the present.
Or the past.
Ooh, or the future.
Oh.
Is that everything?
I think that's all of the important stuff that we could cover.
Yeah, I think those are the prime moments of this here episode. Shall we get into our points of interest?
Yes, let's do that. Okay, so since this is actually kind of the most relevant to what we just left off talking about, the sheep. Yeah. There were 33 sheep. The farmer talks about Gospel 13:33, and we realize we're in 1986 now. The show started off in 2019. That is a difference of 33 years.
Which I'm just going to say is a coincidence. I don't think that if it was a 32-year difference that suddenly one less sheep would have died. But by coincidence, I mean I think it's by design of the
writing,
show. I don't think it's by design of the world.
Yeah, the world tells us that every year you travel, it'll kill a small animal. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's not like if they traveled 50 years in the future, suddenly 50 sheep would die. That's my guess. Okay. But who knows? Maybe that's the mythology.
Maybe something about the waves has to puncture a certain amount of eardrums, but double because, two. Oh. Anyway.
I do like that. That was a good catch of the 33.
Thank you. Yeah. That was me.
Oh my God.
Okay, so, and then going back to the very beginning, we have the Raider candy bar. In the very, very first episode, Jana, who's Ulrich's mom, she says that she found a bunch of candy bar wrappers in the woods after she saw a man with a big head. And
they were Mad's favorite.
Exactly. And then as Mikkel enters the house, he sees this ad on the TV. She's watching the Raider candy bar ad. So
connections.
Yes. And we actually got a bit of feedback about this from the Kawaii Slarty Barfast on YouTube. Raider bars changed their name to Twice in 1991. So Yana shouldn't have found them in the woods in 2019.
Ooh. Interesting.
So someone from the past.
Yeah. Or just like things filter in and out through the caves on the wind or something.
That's a good point. So that's a mystery as well. Yep. Who was it in the woods watching? Was it Mads as an adult eating his favorite candy?
Yeah. Cool.
And the next point of interest is about music. And you're the one who caught this one. Tears for Fears. Here we have Shout.
Yeah, and
playing.
I just wanted to specifically call that out, that it's Tears for Fears, because of the fact that in the previous podcast, I talked about potential Donnie Darko references, and that Tears for Fears is also important for Donnie Darko. Could just be me reaching, because obviously Tears for Fears is also just the 80s.
Right, a really popular band.
Yeah, but just something I want to point out. Also, I'm going to jump down to the Journey Through Time book thing.
Yes.
There is a very similar book in Donnie Darko that's important about time. So, I mean, again, might just be some coincidences, but...
I actually had another connection with the book, and that's, so it's A Journey Through Time by H.G. Tannhaus. Well, a famous book called The Time Machine, or short story, was written by H.G. Wells.
Yeah.
So I just think that's kind of not necessarily like...
an homage.
I think that's what these things are.
Yeah.
So Shout was playing while Mikhail was walking by, and he's the one who was wearing the suit that you drew the comparison to with Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
So I don't think these are by accident.
Yeah.
We have this no future graffiti that shows up. So it's outside of the power plant. It's in Ulrich's room.
I think we can guess that he just did that graffiti.
Yeah, he hates Vinden.
Yeah,
he's
a bad boy.
Yeah. And we kind of mentioned this a little bit, but the red lipstick.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because, we have Claudia wearing it. We have Regina put it on later. We know that color is important for the show. Regina's wearing like bright red throughout the whole episode. Also, Katarina is talking about someone who gets killed because of red lipstick. Hannah says it's for prostitutes. I wonder, again, if that indicates that Claudia won't survive, if she'll be killed or die of cancer. It could just be something, but I think they made a big point of her color scheme.
Yeah.
And that makes me want to go back and look at who else was red in the past.
Well, not necessarily the past, but Mikhail's wearing a bright red coat.
Yeah, that's
so true. We haven't seen enough, I think, to really have like one-to-one color associations. Like, what does yellow mean? What does red mean? Yeah. But I mean, red being blood and blood death, this could very well
have that
be that. So those are our points of interest, things that we're pondering on, just connections or things that are going to be feeding our theories going forward.
So I think the biggest thing that I think originally we walked away from this episode being like, okay, this is confirmed that we haven't talked about, is Mikkel being Michael, who is Jonas's father.
Yes.
Because they so thoroughly drew the connection of Ines being his new mother figure.
Yeah.
And she can't have kids, seemingly, maybe.
Or just doesn't have them.
And so her taking him in as her son, and then him marrying Hannah and having Jonas, and then maybe even committing suicide because he can't still be around when the time travel happens, because for some reason that's not a good thing. I mean, I would have thought like he'd have to kill himself before Mikkel is born.
You would
so there
think.
weren't two of them.
Right.
But I don't know. The only thing that makes me say maybe this isn't a real thing is that I pointed out that would make Marta Jonas's aunt.
Ugh.
Which maybe I'm just assuming there's going to be some romance there, and they're not. They're going to have more of like a sibling relationship. But
that's not what it seems like when he seems jealous of Bartosz and his relationship with Marta.
I don't know. It's European. Maybe they have some crazy stuff over there.
Dude.
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones is by an American dude, so I think we have to take that. Anyway, yeah, that was
Time travel.
That was our theory going into this episode as well, of like who is someone else as an adult, and this definitely feels that way. But it could also be a red herring because it would be too obvious or too weird. Yeah.
Well,
I don't think this show's afraid of being too weird,
yeah,
though.
We'll see. Some nice aunt-cest.
No, stop. We're done. We're done enough with our talking. Let's get to feedback.
Okay, we have other feedback?
Yes.
Exciting.
All right. So if you want to contact us, send us your feedback, you can email us at ourpodcastfeedback@gmail.com.
Or leave us a comment down below of the YouTube video. Or you can leave us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts or one of those other podcast platforms. Some reviews and ratings would be a huge help to us. It helps us be found by other people.
Yes.
It helps Apple push us in the direction of your faces.
Help us promote ourselves and give us a rating.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So we got a lot of feedback about the song that we had questions about. There were so many people who wrote in to us ignorant Americans who don't know German/Eastern Bloc music. So there were a few too many to count. But thank you to everyone who took the time to inform us. The song from the end of episode 1 and also on the cassette player in episode 2 is by Nena. And it translates to anytime, anywhere, any place. So it wasn't written for the show. It was a hit in the 80s.
I thought it probably was a hit. Yeah.
Right.
And the thing that I was like, oh, it's the Luft Balloons lady.
Yeah.
Which I knew that song.
Yeah, I do too. So sorry again for our ignorance.
I like Luft Balloons.
I do too. But maybe I'll start listening to this song too and seeing if I can connect dots to future dark episodes. Next up, we have a bit of feedback from Shane Flynn via YouTube. As far as the comments/concerns about the characters being bad or boring, I wouldn't worry. The issue with the characters is that they don't feel like characters, they feel like people and are less immediately rewarding. So many stories have easily categorized characters/roles. The smart one, the funny one, the hero. This show has more subtle yet complex characters. And while certain characters get more focus/screen time, all the characters get significant development and behave in ways that align with their individual personalities, motives, and situations. Unfortunately, it takes time to build all these characters, so watching weekly rather than binging may affect your experience at first. But I bet you will find yourselves invested in all the characters by the end. The acting in this series also helps. I think all the performances are great and some really stand out beyond that. Yeah.
Cool, yeah. We got a bunch of people saying don't worry too much about the character stuff because we were a little worried last week.
Yeah, we got feedback that kind of contradicts this, of people not being likable and maybe us saying, oh, that means they're not
but
developed.
much more people responded saying don't worry about that.
Yes.
So I'm excited about that. I will say I'm invested in Vindom as a character in a lot of ways.
The location definitely has a feeling. It very much reminds me of like Twin Peaks in a way, where like the town is important. It sets the tone. Yeah. And the fact that we have it as a constant in the past and the present definitely helps.
Yeah, and I think the tone does a great job of feeling consistent. Like it really does. It was a very interesting feel in this episode of how like it clearly was a different time, but it was very clearly the same show. You know, like even when we weren't seeing Mikkel, like it was very like, this is the world. These are all like familiar enough faces. You see the you know, parallels throughout the generations and things like that. And,
And it helps that the Nielsen's still live in the same house and high school still looks the same. Even the police station looks really similar. So you have that through line as well. Yeah.
I'm excited to watch episode 4 because of the fact that we took a week off, but we had already watched episode 3 before we decided to take a week off. So it's been like a long time since I've watched a new episode. I'm raring to go.
Yes, exactly. All right. And our last bit of feedback is from Mike Miller.
It's Miller time.
Okay. Betty has never heard that one before. Nope. Okay. So in regards to the nuclear power plant, we talked about why can't Ulrich just like get in there? His son is missing. Like, who cares about rules and regulations. So Mike writes in, nuclear power plant security personnel is actually authorized to use deadly force in an event of possible radiological sabotage. They do not have to wait for the intruder to fire the first shot. Theirs, the workers, and especially the public safety is of paramount importance. So the guards with the MP5 submachine guns at the ready, that's no exaggeration.
Cool.
Some of your theories are good, and others are way off.
I don't know. I think they're all good.
But that's to be expected with Dark. All the more so since you don't have much to go on yet. Your theorizing will come into its own as the series progresses. You focus on details, and on any other show, I'd say, whoa, don't go overboard with it like that. But here, it's actually justified. Of course, not every tiny detail, otherwise the series would be 6 seasons long. But a surprising amount of things end up being relevant in some way.
All right, guys. So I think that's pretty much it. We will see you next week with episode 4. I don't know the name of it, but I'm sure it's exciting. And anything else?
No, let us know if there's anything else very blatantly culturally obvious that we missed.
Yeah, probably there is.
I'm sure there is.
Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the future.